Welcome to Bed Crime Stories podcast. I'm your host, T. Hi guys, hope you're having a wonderful day. If you're new here, a warm welcome. Thank you for checking out my channel. All I ask is that after listening to and or watching the video, if you find you enjoyed it or learned something, smash that like button and consider subscribing. Now, let's dig in. Story of missing 15-year-old Sebastian Rogers just got a whole lot worse. Seth Rogers was on another channel last night. Actually, he was on several. And he revealed that while in his mother's care, Sebastian was essayed by an older child. The perpetrator was 13 years old, and Sebastian was 7 or 8 at the time. Per Seth, Katie and Chris Proudfoot didn't bother to get Sebastian therapy for this traumatic event until last year. So not only was Sebastian dealing with autism and a cold and allegedly violent stepfather, he was also dealing with this horrible experience. This was a CPS incident, apparently, when the Proudfoots were living in California. Seth said that Katie and Chris let this older kid play with Sebastian, and they failed to check on the two during these play dates. Seth also stated that he'd been trying to get Sebastian help. Seth said he spoke to Sebastian's doctor about this, and she was unaware of the essay incident. The doctor told Seth that the therapy Sebastian was receiving was not the right type for that specific trauma. Chris Proudfoot allegedly told Seth's mother that Sebastian was a child P because of this incident. And this is why Chris did not want Sebastian around his daughter, Faith. Now, there's no evidence that Sebastian ever did anything to anyone that we're aware of. And it sounds like Chris Proudfoot was saying that because this happened to Sebastian, he would be more likely to do that to a sister, as in Chris Proudfoot's daughter, Faith, the one that, according to his ex-wife, he never really wanted. I would say that at this point, Seth Rogers has taken the gloves off. He's no longer keeping his feelings bottled up about the Proudfoots, and he's finally calling the Proudfoots out for their bad behavior. Seth stated that Katie and Chris do not deserve to be parents. And let's face it, people, no one really believes that Sebastian wandered out of the Proudfoot home in the early morning hour darkness of Stafford Court, Tennessee, barefoot. Had Sebastian done that, scent dogs would have picked up on that scent. More and more, it's looking like Sebastian never made it outside of the Proudfoot home, at least not on foot. Seth said he spoke to Sebastian on the Thursday before Sebastian went missing, and everything seemed normal. Sebastian was supposed to finish out the school year with Katie and Chris, and then Seth was going to have Sebastian for the weeks, like every week, and Katie was going to have Sebastian for every other weekend, and then just for school breaks and special holidays. So she was definitely handing over full-time custody, almost full-time custody of Sebastian to Seth. That tells me something wasn't right in the Proudfoot home. Either there was pressure from Chris to get rid of Sebastian, or both Katie and Chris wanted Sebastian out of there. Although on another interview, Seth said that Chris Proudfoot had said to him that he was working on getting Katie to agree to this arrangement. So it sounds like Chris was the primary one pushing for it. Katie was being pressured perhaps by Chris, and ultimately she agreed to let Sebastian go and live with his father. But this was not going to take place until after the school year was completed. Sadly, this didn't happen soon enough, and Seth is kicking himself right now. You can tell he's feeling guilty, and he said he should have done things differently. It seems pretty clear that Seth wasn't aware of how terrified Sebastian likely was of his stepfather. We now know that Chris Proudfoot refused to take the polygraph that Nancy Grace arranged for him. That is highly sus, in my opinion. If you have zero knowledge of something bad going down, why not just take the test and silence people? And I don't want to hear from anyone telling me that polygraphs are unreliable. I've actually taken one with the FBI, and I firmly believe in their power to show when someone's being dishonest versus when someone's being 100% truthful. Seth doesn't believe Sebastian walked away from the Proudfoot home, and neither do I. The story Katie and Chris are telling doesn't make sense. The only way Sebastian got out of that house and did not leave his scent outside and did not get captured on any security cameras was in a vehicle. Sebastian had to have been driven out of the garage in a vehicle. Any other scenario would be hard to believe from what we currently know. Seth said that Chris Proudfoot is the person who called him to say that Sebastian was missing. Seth immediately drove from his home in Clarksville, Tennessee, to the Proudfoot home in Stafford Court, Tennessee. And when he arrived, he saw that law enforcement was already there. So it sounds like he went inside the home and he watched and listened as Katie and Chris answered law enforcement's questions. And what he was hearing immediately set off his spidey sense. Seth said that he believes Sebastian is alive and is being held by someone and is being moved from location to location as the searches move from location to location. He also said that someone in town is ripping down the flyers that Seth and his volunteers have been putting up. Why would anyone do that? Who would do that? Chris and Katie Proudfoot? Some of their relatives, perhaps? Who doesn't want to find a missing autistic child? Seth, however, is not one to be intimidated, and he works as a corrections officer with maximum security inmates, and he's vowing to not stop until he finds Sebastian. Now, Seth painted a picture of his ex-wife, Katie Proudfoot, and her husband, Chris, that is of people who are not fit to be parents, especially of an autistic child who has special needs. Seth described Katie as a mother who wasn't being a parent and who was frustrated by Sebastian's behavior at times. Sebastian is 15. All teenagers are difficult from time to time. My mother and I once got into some sort of fisticuff situation as we were driving home from the mall. And I believe I was in the driver's seat and she was the passenger. It's unbelievable the kind of crap that you get into when all these hormones are surging and you're trying to become independent. You're trying to test the water. You're trying to question authority a little bit. My mom and I ended up in fits of laughter. Thank goodness. It wasn't like we were pounding each other, but we were kind of like swatting at each other. Looking back, I feel mortified over that. I love my mom. Why would I do that? And then if you factor in that Sebastian was autistic, he probably was challenging in more ways than your average teenager. The feeling I'm getting is that Chris and Katie just didn't want to deal with it. They didn't want to muster the patience to deal with it. They just wanted to silence it, ignore it, and not deal with it. Seth also stated that on the weekend Sebastian went missing, Katie was pretty insistent on having a good weekend. To Seth, this meant that Sebastian wouldn't misbehave in Katie's point of view, that Sebastian wouldn't do things that Katie found to be misbehaving. This brings me back to the thud that Katie claims to have heard around 10 o'clock. Could she have harmed him, and that was the thud that she heard? Was Chris Proudfoot maybe there, and did he cause something to create a thud? I always feel like even when we know people are maybe lying about something, that there are some kernels of truth in what they say. Now, when Seth was on court TV last night, Vinnie Politan asked him if Katie's story makes sense to him. Seth brought up that he noticed that in her interview, in Katie's interview with Chronicles of Olivia, she asked Chris to verify a part of her story. And Seth then asked if Chris Proudfoot was really out of town. then how would he know? Why would she ask him to verify that part of her story when he supposedly was in Memphis? In French, they have an expression, ça pue, like Pepe le Pew. Ça pue means that stinks. So I'm going to say it. Katie and Chris Proudfoot's story, poo. It stinks. Seth also rightly pointed out that in her first interview, Katie told Chronicles of Olivia that she heard some noise in Sebastian's room and she shouted for Sebastian to go to bed. But in the other interview, or one of the other interviews, she described the noise she heard as a thud. And even though it was a thud, she still didn't go inside to check on her autistic child. So in the one interview, she makes it sound like it was just a noise. And in the other one, she makes it sound a little more nefarious, a thud. Back to Vinny of Court TV, Seth told him that in the video from Texas Roadhouse, he only saw Katie and Sebastian, and the video was taken outside, and it was of the two of them walking to their vehicle at 6:30 p.m. Seth also told Vinny that law enforcement has let him know that the neighbors of the Proudfoots who had security camera footage have turned it over to them. Seth also made it clear that without Sebastian, he doesn't have much of a life. He said he only had a life every other weekend when Sebastian would come over, and also on school breaks and holidays. When he didn't have Sebastian, he worked. That was his life. He did whatever he could to get weekends off when Sebastian was with him so that he could devote all of his time to his child. Seth's mother recently told him apparently to clean up his house because she said it would make him feel better, but Seth doesn't want to move anything. He wants it just the way it was when Sebastian was last there, and he said that when Sebastian walks back into the house, he wants it to feel like his sanctuary, as it always was. Now, there is talk of issues with Seth, where Katie apparently once accused him of being abusive to Sebastian when they were married and living in California. Seth denies Katie's allegations, and all I have to say is Seth apparently has an alibi. Seth is not the person who's on the hot seat here. Sebastian wasn't in Seth's care when he went missing. He was in the care of the Proudfoots, however, so their past history with any type of violent behavior is very important. Right now, the only parent searching for Sebastian is Seth. That's a fact. That's true. And that's really all that matters right now. Seth said he was in the Proudfoot home on and off for about 3 days right after Sebastian went missing. He said after those 3 days, things turned hostile in the house between him and the Proudfoots. Now, Seth needs an army to help him search for Sebastian. This is how we on social media can really help. People often accuse true crime creators of taking advantage of victims and their families. However, what they fail to think about is that we're able to tell these people's story, and we're able to get their photos out. And that's what we're doing because we care and we want Sebastian to be found. So if you can help Seth search, that would be the greatest thing you could do for him. Also, if you can donate money to his Cash App, it's actually not his Cash App, it's a friend of his, and I'll put a photo of it in this video so you can see it. There's a code you can scan, and the name for the monies is $TMB F as in Frank, LEMING. He said that that's the best way to get the money to him. He's concerned about the GoFundMe that's out there for some reason. I think there are some concerns about where those monies are actually going. So he asked that we do not give money to the GoFundMe for now. Okay, well, that's the latest news that I have on the Sebastian Rogers case, and I hope you have a fantabulous rest of your day, and I'll see you next time on Bed Crime Stories. As for me, I'm off to the hospital to see my dad. He's in there once again. I'm hoping he will be discharged today, but we shall see.